This week on One Day Leader, our contestants tackle the issue of economic reform in our country. Sanibonani Mzansi, and welcome to One Day Leader, your favorite youth leadership show. We're back here on SABC 1 and very excited to kickstart where the show left off. Emakaya, of course, we know you've been waiting for the show to come back on the air. Our contestants have been fighting it out for the last 10 weeks, and now we're heading into our first elimination round. To find out who will be packing their bags, do stay with us until the end of the show. Mzansi, the coronavirus has left nothing untouched in its wake. Since our government's stay-at-home order, our daily lives have changed. For few of us, it was developing creative ways to cope with the lockdown restrictions. But for millions working in the informal sector and those who rely on a daily income, it was catastrophic. Many were faced with the uncertainty of not being able to pay rent, their rates, or simply being able to put food on their table. This virus will create more and more poor and hungry people than it will probably kill. South Africa, our nation's future is at a precipice. Our economy is in desperate need of a lifeline, which leads me to tonight's debate question. What economic system or reform should be adopted to restart and kickstart the South African economy? You at home can, of course, join the conversation by visiting our social media pages. We are on Twitter and Instagram. Simply search at One Day Leader. And, of course, find us on Facebook. One Day Leader Season 8 is the page that you are looking for there. Leaders, I know you've been under pressure this entire season, but I hope that you've been able to introspect while you were home and prepare for tonight's show. It is very important as someone might be going home. We're ready to hear your vision statements. As usual, Lindo Kuhle, go ahead.
Today's debate necessitates that we look within ourselves, our values, as well as our communities, particularly due to the duty to imagine an economic system or reforms that are ideal to restart the country in the context of a global recession as well as a global pandemic. Bagiti, today's debate requires a radical solution. However, I propose that we have the capacity to innovate solutions that directly affect the problems that affect us. Naloko Bagiti, it's people-inspired solutions to our problems. Nyabong.
Thank you very much, Leader 1. Tobani, welcome back. Your vision statement, please.
I'm an African who is reminded that this land that we live upon was not a gift from our forefathers and ancestors, but was rather an obligation given unto us by the children and generations to come, that we may fix it for them to live in a better society. We have long lived in deception that we are owed by our elders to fix this country for us, but we're not remembering that we should do that obligation so that our children might find a better day and a better tomorrow. So South Africa and Africans, join me in building an Africa that is better for everyone and safe for all of us to coexist in mutual benefits. Mayihlome ma-Afrika, mayihlome mzonsundu, masiyeni phambili.
Thank you very much, Leader 2. Leader 3, welcome back. Zizi Po, it's your turn.
I am on a mission to establish contact beyond the grave with the heroes of our past, to assure them that their struggle was not in vain, but most importantly to remind you and I that our voices did not get drowned by the echoes of our forefathers from the bullet of the colonialists. Africa is not poor. Africa is being robbed by our silence, apathy, and neutrality. For socio-economic transformation and emancipation, South Africa needs a new type of citizen, a catalyst for change, a surgeon for humanity, and an advocate for Africanism. If not you, then who? And if not now, then when?
Thank you very much, Leader 3. Welcome back to you and good evening, Leader 4. Zanele, it's your turn.
Fellow South Africans, kindly allow me to reintroduce myself. Zizo Jigizinto is a philosophy of change, hope, and reimagining a better tomorrow. I lead a transformative education system which tries to teach the marginalized not only textbook-written text, but tries to help them reimagine how they can rise above their challenging circumstances. Ngiyabonga.
Thank you very much, Leader 4. Welcome back to you, Leader 5. Vusi, go ahead.
Khotso ya Modimo a be le lona. The creation of a peaceful and prosperous society that includes all people of all races, regardless of gender and transcending sexual orientation, is the development of citizens with a sociological understanding for their societies so that they can meaningfully contribute to them. I am the one you've been waiting for.
Thank you very much, Leader 5. Leader 6, welcome back. Good evening. Belle, your vision statement, please.
My voice, my mind, my life. 3 things I will use to fight for those whose suffering has been silenced. youth hindered by a lackluster education system, women under siege by the patriarchy from the gender pay gap to gender-based violence, queer bodies systemically excluded from all sectors of society, the 99% who've been repeatedly failed by the state, and black Africans who continue to live under the dictatorship that is the legacy of apartheid. South Africa, I give you my voice, my mind, my life.
Thank you very much, leaders, for those very powerful vision statements. They've made you very popular on social media. Now, for 3 months, our leaders have been battling it out. As Kesbuke kwi-scoreboard sethu sibona ukuthi ngabo bani abahamba phambili. Lindo Kuhle is on 3 points, Tobani is on 4, Zizipo is on 7, Zanele is also on 4, and Vusi and Bell are both sitting at 10 points each. That's what our current scoreboard looks like, and remember, it is up to our leaders to change their own fate today. Over to our guest judge. Ms. Lebohang Pheko is a senior research fellow, political economist with interest in the African political economy, international trade and small enterprise development. She's also a former president of the Business Women's Association. Also, allow me to welcome our resident judges that you know and love. Gugulethu Gugs Mshungu has over 10 years experience in media and was the winner of the 2015 Columnist of the Year at the Legends Media Awards, as well as Ndumiso Hadebe, who is a One Day Leader alumni. He won season 2 of this very show, is an economist by profession and an entrepreneur. I wish we had an audience to clap tonight, but we are still keeping our social distancing. All right, to our guest judge, how troubled was the South African economy even before this pandemic really kicked off?
So it was in what we could call a technical recession, and I think that that's a semantic, because a recession is something that illustrates that an economy has been contracting for several quarters, and a technical recession is just a polite way of saying that things had been free falling for quite a long time. I think another issue is that our import-export market has not been as vibrant as it could be. And lastly, the currency. Our rand has been fluctuating very badly. For the last couple of years, actually, we haven't been able to pick a struggle, stay at 1 to 20 rands or 1 to $15. It's been fluctuating, and that illustrates so many other things, such as our lack of capital controls, and also that there just isn't enough sentiment in our markets. And that has been the case since 2008, actually. So we haven't quite recovered from that sticky moment, and now we're in another even stickier moment.
Sure. Ndumiso, just hearing all of that, I'm just like, we did not need this pandemic, especially not now.
The impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, when more and more businesses are going online, and even as you look at the structure of the South African economy, where the biggest nominal contributor to the South African economy is business services, finance and trade. Those are sectors that the large population of South Africans can't necessarily, from a skills and qualifications perspective, qualify to get into. If you're going to look at young people who don't have post-schooling qualifications, ultimately it adds to the barriers of entry for employability of young people who are already out of work.
Thank you very much, Ndumiso Gugs. I'll have to come back to you later. Now, our country has enacted numerous economic policies to rebuild and transform the economy after apartheid in order to establish a more equal society for all South Africans. After the break, we'll learn more about them and why our country's economy needs drastic measures to be resuscitated. We'll be right back. Ninga Hampi. One Day Leader Season 8 on SABC 1. Thank you so much for staying with us. South Africa's economy has always been fighting an uphill battle. The 2008 global recession took the country into its first recession in 19 years, and nearly 1 million jobs were lost. After that, the country was downgraded to junk status by S&P and Fitch, and the state capture cost the country between 500 billion and 1.5 trillion rand. Now, today's debate topic is what economic system or reform should be adopted to restart the South African economy. Ningakhohlana lapha emakhaya ukuthi owenu umbono ubalekile, ngakho ke xhumana nathi on our social media platforms. Ningasithola ku Instagram and Twitter at One Day Leader, kanti ke page lethu ku Facebook lithi One Day Leader Season 8. Now, Gugs, I have to come to you. Is there a relationship between the ideological interests of our society and the failure of government to achieve economic emancipation, reform?
I think absolutely. And you see it in the kind of contestation of ideas in our country and what is the best way to go forward. And not just South Africa, I think in the world in general, for as long as it has been time, there's always been this battle of ideas about what is the best way to achieve certain ends, right? So ours is quite complicated, but you're starting to see in certain countries, an example off the top of my head is Canada, which is saying, in the absence of the kind of economic growth which we may have expected or have become accustomed to, how do we ensure that people's basic needs, their basic rights, remain protected in that time? And I'm hoping it comes up in the debates. I'm really hoping our leaders have given that a lot of thought, because that's part of this conversation. And it's very relevant for the most unequal society or the most unequal country in the world.
Wow. Interesting stuff, Mzansi. I hope you are paying attention. And later on, I'm looking forward to seeing how our debates will unfold. But for now, let's take a look at the potential impact of the coronavirus on our already battered economy.
1994, 27 April. Voters stand for hours in queues stretching over a kilometre to vote for freedom, equality and prosperity.
Thousands of people lined up for nearly 2.5 miles for emergency food parcels in the South African city of Centurion.
2020, May 2, Olivenheidbosch. Long queues for food parcels.
They still have not received these food parcels, so community members really frustrated. Some of them saying that they have no food in their homes.
I'm waiting for food. They still promise me since yesterday.
Once more, the COVID-19 pandemic exposed the fault lines in our country between rich and poor. Various socio-economic policies were chosen to rebuild and transform the economy after apartheid. The Reconstruction and Development Program was successful with social security, but failed in terms of economic growth. In 1996, the Growth, Employment and Redistribution Strategy reversed negative growth but fell short of reducing unemployment and redistributing wealth.
Unemployment levels are high. The lockdown has made it even more difficult for many to provide for their families.
The Accelerated and Shared Growth Initiative for South Africa and the New Growth Path both came and went with little government feedback about their fates.
We have learned a great deal from the experience of other countries. The National Coronavirus Command Council has decided to enforce a nationwide lockdown for 21 days.
Our government acted fast to curb the spread of COVID-19. This was followed by a 500 billion rand economic and social support package to cushion citizens from its economic impact. But will it be enough for all? The virus has already decimated global markets and wiped R1 trillion off the JSE. Forecasts predict that 1.6 million jobs will be shed in 2020 alone. This figure is only for the first half of the year. How bad is the impact of the virus on the global economy? The IMF predicts that it is the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression.
For 2020, it is negative, a recession at least as bad as during the global financial crisis or worse. But we expect recovery in 2021.
South Africa's economic future is still modelled around the National Development Plan, which seeks to eradicate poverty, inequality and unemployment by 2030. Radical economic transformation best for SA post-COVID-19. South Africa is facing a potential economic crisis. It has little revenue to spare, debt has been rising, economic growth is too low, and unemployment is very high. Can South Africa forge a new economy after COVID-19?
Mugeli, it's time for us to take a quick break. Remember that your comments, your questions, and your contributions are more than welcome on our social media platforms. After the break, our debaters take to their podium and we'll see what happens. Stay with us.
As the NYDA, we're very excited with the change that comes with the new government. The presidency in particular is very much focused on young people, and the NYDA plays a central role in implementing the vision of government as it relates to its youth. We're going to introduce new and innovative funds, and we're going to partner with other entities like the Department of Small Business to bring comprehensive packages of support to young people who want to be and are passionate entrepreneurs. We'll be upgrading many of our service centers, and we'll be working with entities like the Department of Employment and Labor and our social partners, Harambee and the Youth Employment Service.
That message was brought to you by the NYDA. The NYDA is dedicated to playing a role in nurturing and improving the livelihoods of youth in our country. According to the Department of Economic Development, corruption costs South Africa no less than 27 billion rands a year, diminishing public revenues and eroding public trust, which is why we're asking what economic system or reform should be adopted to restart the South African economy. Before we kick off tonight's debates, let's first check out the rules of engagement in case you forgot. You have 60 seconds to propose, 90 seconds to debate, and 30 seconds to conclude. We're very excited to get into our first round of debates. And of course, our leaders have prepared themselves well in advance to tackle tonight's topic. Our first debate will be between Leader 1 and Leader 3. We're going to start with you, Leader 3. Your 60 seconds start now.
We must address the deep structural constraints that will lift output in sectors such as mining, agriculture, manufacturing and services by improving the ability of these sectors to generate jobs. Wasteful expenditure and corruption must be addressed through the marginalization and arrest of individuals and organizations who have been involved in corruption activities driven by the government and communities, supported by appropriate legislation and people's mobilized power. We need to focus on land reform by ensuring that white commercial farmers contribute to the success of black farmers through mentorships, chain integration, and we also need to reduce the reliance on foreign investment by using government departments, reserve banks, state financial institutions, and contribution from general public and business corporations, and taxation of the upper class as sources of investable financial capital. Our fiscal policies need to be revisited and reconstructed. We need to reduce administrative costs and bloated budgets, and business needs to shift from a sales-based to a values-based operation. What I'm proposing is basically structural reform. Now, the purpose
Time is up, Leader 3. Leaders, you can engage.
Okay, the purpose of structural reform is to tackle the obstacles to the fundamental drivers of growth, and that is by liberalizing labor, products and service markets to stimulate job creation, investment, improve productivity and boost the economy's competitiveness.
So I don't understand how your solution is structural if it focuses on specific industries. So when you focus on things like mining, that can't be structural, because if it's structural, it's supposed to be fundamental and encompass many more other industries.
Okay, my solution is quite broad in the sense that the forms of reform I'm proposing can be narrowed, and the efforts that are made must strictly support appropriate and achievable reforms that are not exclusive of Pan-Africanist and socialist principles, and we must codify our policies and strategies according to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. Now, why this approach simply works is because it demands direct, active participation of Africans, and it demands that leaders adopt a people-centered constitutionalism and protects the sovereignty of a nation's wealth and resources over westernized
So
powers.
that sounds great ideologically, but then how does that translate into actual tangible change? How do you implement Pan-Africanist policies, especially in a context of a global recession and a global pandemic?
I've given you solutions to address wasteful expenditure and corruption. I've addressed land reform. I've given you a solution to reduce
Sorry, just quickly on corruption, you mentioned that it should be reduced, but you didn't give us a mechanism for how that should happen.
Through the marginalization and arrest of individuals and organizations who have been involved in corrupt activities driven by
Time
the
is up.
government.
Thank you very much, Leader 3. You can wrap it up for us.
Okay. The reality is that the existent policy documents such as the National Development Plan 2030 in financial spheres are amplifiers of inequality, and that is why South Africa's credit rating continues to deteriorate. Now, what we need to do is implement structural reform and ensure that any policies that we put in place will address the economic legacy of colonialism. Because if we do not do that, then the majority remain on the periphery of the economy. And an economy that excludes its majority...
Time's up, Leader 3. Thank you very much. It's your turn, Leader 1.
So my solution in today's debate is export-led economic reforms through the establishment of a protectionist economy. More specifically, we would employ quotas on the volume of foreign goods as opposed to tariffs themselves. And the purpose behind this is firstly to create an enabling economic environment for domestic producers in an effort to increase domestic production, but secondly, to protect domestic businesses from foreign competition. A couple of reasons why this solution is good. Firstly, the strategy makes it imperative for the state to prioritize SMEs and startups. What this means is that the state finances as well as facilitates the growth of these enterprises in order to establish competitive, innovative, as well as profitable businesses in lacking industry. An example of this is South Korea. In the 1960s, they established a similar protectionist policy to try to divert their economy from being largely agrarian into becoming a very technologically strong. What's this industry? That's why the state, for example, financed a lot of companies.
Thank you very much. You can engage leaders.
One being Samsung, which eventually grew to become a very strong and competitive global phenomenon. Yes.
You spoke about SMEs, but I don't understand how the motion you're proposing directly speaks to the economic freedom that marginalized entrepreneurs in townships and rural areas do not have. And how will your motion ensure the economic development that will give them systems that can be sustainable on the ground?
Because my solution says that the state should protect them from competition, from foreign businesses that suffocates them. The reason why a spaza shop...
Yes, but how, Lindo? Pick n Pay and ShopRite are building spaza shops in the township and taking a pie of their township economy.
That's exactly what I'm telling
What
you.
solution are you proposing
a quota
to that?
That says we will only allow a certain number of ShopRite businesses to operate in order to allow
what
more
the government needs to do
operate.
What the government needs to do is to alter policies such as the Township Economic Development Act and ensure that it protects Western powers,
you see, the
private
with
sector
solution is that
from
it
invading
in
the
a
township
context
economy.
in which we still exist in a capitalist global economy where foreign competition still exists. An act can do so little for you if the economy will always have room or it's largely dominated by bigger foreign businesses.
It makes no use to formalize and to
much.
develop a sector if the people on the ground cannot be protected from
that's
being
exactly
invaded.
what protectionism does. It gives you the space to grow because the
How
government
is your
finances
model
and facilitates
protecting?
your growth. Because it says we're blocking foreign competition and we're providing you with resources.
Thank you very much, Leader.
Time
Time is up. Leader 1, you can wrap it up in 30 seconds.
The reason why this model is also specifically important is that it improves the efficiency of existent reform policies such as BEE. This is because when the primary plan of the state is to support numerous businesses, it means that it has to create a capacity as well as an incentive to use already existing structures such as triple BEE to empower especially minority groups. This means that individuals who are left behind are suddenly the most important actor in order for the state to employ people. Why? Because when you create more
Thank you very much.
businesses,
Unfortunately, Leader
you're
1,
able to create
your time
employment.
is up. We're going to come to Gooks for comments.
I think quite an interesting start to the debate. I think quite a lot of time spent on kind of the policy, but also the economy itself. I wasn't getting enough of the connection of, yes, the economy, in many ways we speak about it as kind of this thing that is out there, but in what very tangible ways in a country with over 60% poverty, how does the improvement of that thing benefit those people? Because South Africa at some point was the good story of, for instance, dealing with extreme poverty. In fact, much of the world had the good story of dealing with extreme poverty, but then we neglected to deal with the issue of inequality, which we're seeing being a challenge not only for poor countries like ours, but in other societies like the UK, like the US, where we'd failed to, for instance, look at things like, inequality. So for me, I think that bit of detail was missing.
Dumiso, are we ready?
Zizipo.
Zizipo. All right, congratulations, Zizipo. All right, so Masbuye Dolo, we get to our next round of debates. Things are heated. Thank you so much for staying with us. Konalagu One Day Leader Season 8. Ikamangu Pearl Shongwe. Our debate topic for today is what economic system or reform should be adopted to restart the South African economy. Our next debate is between Leader 4, Zanele, and Leader 6, Bell. Bell will give you an opportunity to go first. Your time starts now.
There is immense uncertainty surrounding the global pandemic. However, through the requisite measures, we can prepare South Africa to rebuild her economy. In the short term, economic measures, e.g. rent moratoria, debt restructuring and expanded unemployment insurance to protect individuals and small businesses and prevent long-term economic harms. Support the Department of Health by spending on healthcare and testing, unconditional grants and proactive job creation policies as fiscal stimuli directed at young people and entrepreneurs, and working with trade unions to bring about a transformed and inclusive economy. In the medium term, addressing the energy crisis via privatization and funneling state employees into new private corporations. This mitigates job loss, lowers operational costs and increases competition. Rebuilding and improving infrastructure is another form of fiscal stimulus, thus creating jobs in many sectors, promoting competitiveness and facilitating growth and attracting foreign investment. Furthermore, improving SADC trading in the same vein that we've seen across ASEAN countries, and then introducing educational reforms. Finally, in terms of long-term measures that we can implement, firstly, political measures. These are things like reforming the...
Time's up. Thank you very much. Leaders, you can engage.
In a moment, reforming the electoral system, promoting better forms of governance for better accountability, combating corruption and creating long-term economic stability and growth, fostering manufacturing within South Africa. Our supply chains are incredibly vulnerable. The global pandemic has highlighted this. In a moment, legal reform specifically for SMEs and tax, yes.
Please explain the issue of unconditional grants.
Sure. So the idea of the unconditional grants is that it's a social grant which is directed specifically at young people. I gave the characterization of the individuals that it would be affected
because I think it's problematic to have grants that do not have conditions, because it means that we can't ascertain that there will be economic benefit from the government in investing in those types of businesses.
Your argument is segueing too closely to the stock argument of why a welfare state is necessarily bad, because supposedly welfare states generate lazy individuals.
South Africa has not been sustainable, Bell. Allow me to engage.
This is an argument that
Allow me to engage. South Africa has not been sustainable in creating entrepreneurs that can last for beyond the 1 year term.
Sure,
so if you give unconditional grants for businesses
within
that
that
will
policy,
fail.
I speak about proactive job creation policies, right? It's not just, it can take a variety of forms in conjunction with the fiscal stimulus examples that I cited in my policy. Extending on the idea of healthcare. So when the vaccine becomes available, it's things like lobbying for this vaccine to become available freely. In terms of trade unions, it's trade unions also as democratic, representative and internationalist bodies with insight into transforming economic policy with the efficacy they've proven in Latin America.
How do you intend to improve the SADC trading as you have stated?
Time is up, Leader. Thank you very much. Leader 6, you can close your argument.
The effects of COVID-19 will be far worse than the 2008 financial crisis. Fiscal stimuluses will allow us to mitigate harms rather effectively, but they're insufficient in isolation. These solutions equip South Africans not only with mechanisms to survive the lockdown itself, but to grow our economy in the future. This model guarantees empowerment, choice, agency, education, and transformation. We need a variety of mechanisms that empower the disenfranchised and address the inequalities this global crisis has highlighted and rebuild a better South Africa for all.
Time is up. Thank you very much. The tables are turned. Leader 4, it's your turn.
The current coronavirus pandemic has highlighted the very high levels of inequality in our country, but it has also showed that land ownership is intrinsically tied to the expression or enjoyment of human dignity. What we need to reform our economy, firstly, is to discuss economic reform and increase the way in which we redistribute land. The land audit of 2017 shows us that 72% of the country's arable land is white-owned, and white people account only for nothing beyond 10% of the country's population. This needs to change, and it needs to change fast. We need to fully utilize constitutional provisions such as Section 25 of the Constitution, which can help accelerate the rate at which land is redistributed. We need to budget better for investing in land redistribution programs to ensure that people don't find themselves packed up in shacks and being unable to even farm or sustain themselves in times like the global pandemic that we're currently facing. So land reform is a big part of the conversation. Secondly, we need to privatize key sectors of state-owned enterprises which have been costing the economy. These include Eskom, SAA, PRASA. Since 1994, the government has given
Thank you
more
very
than
much.
57
Leaders, you can engage.
Yes, since 1994, the government has given more than 57 billion rands in bailouts for SAA alone. This means that we can see that state-owned enterprises are costing the economy. Last year, the load shedding problem meant that we incurred a lot of economic loss. Therefore, the government must assume a regulatory role when we privatize, so that they can prevent things such as consumer exploitation. Yes.
The benefit of something like an unconditional grant is that it gives poor, disenfranchised black people the capital they need to be able to purchase and invest in land that they're given. Additionally, my model also caters for things like reforming the current land redistribution mechanisms.
The reality, Belle, is that currently we are facing a backdrop of a global recession, which means that the finances to give people money are not even available or even sustainable. What happens when you get land is the fact that it is property in and of itself. It allows you to trade in it. It allows you to express human dignity where you are not packed in a shack with other people during a pandemic. Therefore, it is more sustainable and even a bit more, it is more sustainable to give people land than it is to just give them grants when their businesses can fail.
Sure. So now that you've given someone a piece of land, what other mechanisms have you got in place to make sure that those individuals have the requisite support from government to flourish?
When we privatize the ownership of things like Eskom, when we privatize the ownership of things such as other state-owned enterprises, people who have land have the ability to compete in those types of industries that have been monopolized by the government for a very long time. It means that people can use the land that they have. It is not. People can use the land to produce electricity in other alternatives, not using
for themselves. Thank you very much. Time is up. Leader 4, you can close your argument, please.
The reality of the matter is that land ownership is the backbone of economic emancipation for marginalized groups. We need to address this as soon as possible in line with other reform structures, such as the privatization of state-owned companies, such as the reform of education, and ensuring that people enjoy their human dignity as they have been promised in the Constitution. It is disingenuous in this debate to think that things such as giving grants, which has been continuing, will be sustainable. It helps in the short term, but in the long term, we need a radical solution that can help transform our economy and can help restore
Thank you very
the
much,
dignity
Leader
of the
4.
marginalized.
Time is up. And Dumis, I'll come to you first for comments on that second debate.
Very interesting points that have been raised by both. I think because of the pandemic itself, it has raised a lot of fundamental issues. And one of those issues have previous monetary and fiscal interventions worked at the level at which they've worked, social transfers and so forth? And what is the potential impact, if it would be better, of something, for instance, such as direct job creation? And I think something that is targeted towards direct job creation speaks more to the argument that Zanele is raising, because it's more targeted, dealing with a very contentious issue and needing to be decisive around it. And I've seen that you've anchored your debate around the land issue as a precursor to being the panacea of a new economy that we would have. Bell, on the other side, you've cited a number of interventions on the short, medium and long term that can be done. Some are good, some are a rehash, but not to say that they can't work. So it presents two sort of polar approaches to approaching this particular issue. One is multi-pronged, it has a variety of other issues. The other says this one is the anchor tenant of what will enable this type of transformation that we want to achieve.
Googs?
Difficult task.
I don't wish to be sitting in your chair.
Harder and harder. A very fantastic second debate. We had a lot to think about, lots to kind of discuss, but this one goes to Leader 6, Bell.
All right. Thank you very much. Congratulations to you, Leader 6. It's time for us to get into our final debate of the evening, which is pretty obvious. It's going to be Leader 2 taking on Leader 5. Leader 5, your time starts now.
South Africa's economy expanded at the slowest pace since the global financial crisis. According to Stats SA, the GDP shrank to 1.4% in the last quarter of 2019 and expanded just 0.2% for the full year. The lack of competition in the strategic sectors of the economy has led to pervasive poverty and high unemployment. This is supported by the World Bank diagnostic assessment of the country. Sustained high economic growth that is open to new actors will create jobs, alleviate poverty and reduce inequality. Here is how we do it. With manufacturing contracted by 2.1%, currently stands at 13% instead of the recommended 25%. With inadequate resources to finance development, the manufacturing sector is key. This is because the manufacturing sector has great potential to create jobs not only for the skilled, but for the semi-skilled and unskilled as well, simultaneously enhancing inclusive economic growth. Secondly, we utilize the general anti-avoidance rules in the Income Tax Act to combat profit shifting so that we can generate the resources to incentivize taxes for sectors that have high employment multipliers, such as construction, manufacturing.
Thank you very much, leaders. You can engage.
Can I continue?
Just continue.
The reason why you must focus on manufacturing is that currently South Africa's economy is structured in a way that the finances at 20% is the biggest contributor to the GDP, where most of South Africans can't access it, while manufacturing instead of the 25% is at 13%.
Can I how we you on those 2 points? One, you said that the greatest problem that we have is first the lack of competition that we have in the market that already pre-exists. How are you going to ensure that there is promotion of competition? Because whenever a small spaza shop tries and compete with the big spaza, it fails. And secondly, you're saying that you also want to enhance the manufacturing sector. Okay. We do not have the means of production for manufacturing sector. So how are we going to go about it?
That's what I was doing that.
Okay.
Through the Department of Trade and Industry Industrial Policy Action Plan, we will be able to strengthen intra-governmental integration and coordination in order to surge industrial development and create inclusive growth. Since our future is not divorced from the rest of the continent, what makes manufacturing very important? It is because it is in line with the latest African Union Economic Pact, the African Continental Free Trade Area, which aims to enhance competitiveness at industry level through capitalizing on the skill of manufacturing. This would give South Africa, this would make South Africa benefit from international trade within the continent. The reason also why it's important is because we know that South African products have a large export base in the UK, in the US, and also on the continent. Going to the issue of making the industry competitive.
Can I just? It's just that there's time concern, sir.
Okay.
So you're saying that you'd also want to bring about with your trade policies.
Time is up. Thank you very much. Leader 5, you can wrap it up, please, in 30 seconds.
Okay. South Africa loses over 100 billion rand in tax revenue each year as a result of profit shifting and wage evasion. By utilizing the general anti-avoidance rules in the Income Tax Act, we'll be able to generate money that will help us subsidize tax incentives for sectors that have high multiple employers, such as focusing specifically on SMMEs. This is because SMMEs play a particularly important role on the development in developing countries and are productive drivers of inclusive growth, particularly when it comes to innovation.
Time is up. Thank you very much. The tables are turned. Leader 2, it's your turn.
In the policies that we would want to propose to promote economic reform in South Africa, there's 4 cardinals that we need to ensure that they are promoted. We need to ensure that literacy has been improved, both digital and any forms of literacy. We need to improve our infrastructure. It has been said, the physical and the social infrastructure, we need to improve it. Reduce poverty and inequality in our nation. That's also going to be essential. And also ensure that you have improved affordable quality healthcare services and public sector services. So how do we go about in ensuring that the aforementioned are promoted? One, you need to ensure that we have an export-oriented development in the sector. You need to ensure effective tax structures and tax collections within our society. Diversify the market from being a single molecular market. Ensure that you have an improved macroeconomical conditions that allow for stable economy in a climate of low inflation and high economy that is highly effective. Ensure that there is a free market supply and there's great corruption watch and corruption war that you bring about into the system. And also ensure that, finally but not least, ensure that government has a great governmental intervention.
You can carry on. Your point time is up. You can engage.
There is great governmental intervention in the supply policies of the public sector. Let me just engage before.
The Department of Trade and Industry is the one that is tasked with implementing economic reform. What is their role in that solution?
But the Department of Trade was your own case, so no, it's your own problem.
I'm telling you,
you can't be asking me your case in my own problem.
It's not a government policy. I'm saying a government policy. It's the one that is tasked with implementing any policy related to economic reform. So I'm saying, what are their role in those solutions? That's what I'm saying.
Or the Department of Trade.
What do they have a role there?
They have a role because we're speaking about trade. You need to involve them. Now, this is what happens. My first point was, I said that you need to have an export-oriented development. As we know that South Africa usually buys, for instance, we buy meat from America at a high cost, which is absorbent. The reason we buy meat at America, but there's still Angola, which has an excess of cows that they are giving out for free in their own state, it's only because that we are having a problem of our export trade, having high tariffs when we trade with our own people.
But South Africa already has a high export base on the continent.
So how about you decrease that trade so that we can start trading with our own African countries countries at a lower cost, while also promoting to ensure that there is free trade within and amongst our own people.
But you're not citing any laws within the Department of DTI because they are the one responsible for export. Second, my question is looking at the GDP now with finances being the largest contributor, 20%, and agriculture 4%, manufacturing 30%. How are you able to address the discrepancies in the GDP? So that they can lead to inclusive economic growth.
Time is up. Thank you very much, leaders. You can close your argument, leader 2.
Okay, this is what happens. I said that we need to have effective tax structures and tax collections. Now, this is what happens in South Africa. We realize that if you are not taxing the private sector and the production sector, you lose more than 550 million per annum. But what happens if you decide to have a proper structure that's going to tax both the private sector while also taxing the pre-existing governmental structures that are already there? You know, in South Africa, we had politicians who are owing the state the biggest margins of tax because they know how to evade tax.
Thank you very much, Leader 2. Your time is up. We're going to have to go to our guest judge for today, who's going to give us her thoughts on that final debate.
That was combustible, robust. Yeah. I enjoyed that. I mean, I think some of the solutions there are not necessarily fresh and out of the box, but I think what they do illustrate is that perhaps what we haven't been able to do in this country is to do the fundamentals well. And there's some merit in actually restating that some of the fundamentals themselves haven't been and have not per se failed. They just have not been given the opportunity to have wings. I mean, we speak about doing something about the GDP. Both of you spoke very vigorously about the tax, about tax flight, capital flight, which is a huge issue.
All right, thank you very much. Ndumis, I'll come to you for the verdict.
Leader 2.
Leader 2. Congratulations, Thobani. You get yourself a point. Now, after the break, we will get parting shots from our judges and find out which leader will be perhaps packing their bags today and going home. Hello and welcome back to One Day Leader. We're about to close off today's show. It's really been an exciting one. Before we announce which leader will be the first to go home this season, let's quickly get parting words from our judges. And of course, we'll start with our guest judge on her thoughts and experience on our show today. Oslebohang, go ahead.
So I'm really impressed and excited by what the future looks like. And I think I want to congratulate all of the leaders in this room, because it takes a lot to enunciate and to imagine and to think through and to research to this extent. And I'd really like to encourage all of us, all of the leaders here, to think of a world beyond COVID and to think about the kind of anchors which are necessary, the economic anchors, the educational anchors, the systemic anchors, to think about what has failed and why, and also to rethink, to think adjacent to current ideas. So if not IMF, who? If not World Bank, who? If not the Reserve Bank, who? And then if we're going to use particular institutions, are there ways and mechanisms that they can be reformed, they can be rethought, they can be reconfigured? And what works for African people? That's always at the center of this, because this is African leadership in an African context. What works for African people at a time such as this?
Thank you very much. Googs, your parting words to our contestants?
As we get closer and closer to the end, what's quite important is, and again, kind of coming back to the idea that every point matters. You know, point is the difference between whether you're eliminated and you stay. What your competitors are going to want to see is if you've kind of thought about some of the things you don't mention in your solutions.
The most important thing, I think, for whoever is going home today is that you ought to view yourself as an agent of change. And that I hope that this process reaffirmed the leader that you saw yourself when you applied to be on this platform. If this platform has not given you that reaffirmation that you yourself are a change agent, then I think then this experience has not been worthwhile. Again, congratulations to all of you in that respect.
Thank you very much to all of you judges. Now, the moment has arrived, a sad moment every single season when we have to start saying goodbye to somebody. It is just not the same. You know, we lose someone who's contributed immensely to the show. Let's quickly take a look at our final scoreboard and what those numbers look like. Zanzi, we've seen our final scoreboard for the evening, and unfortunately it is leader 1 who is the first to leave us tonight. Before we say goodbye to you, let's quickly take a look at your journey throughout the season.
So you come into, at least I come into the show, and at the very minimum, what I told myself was, I have genuine intentions. I have genuine beliefs that things can be better. And at the beginning, you tell yourself that that's sufficient, that to be genuine in your intentions is enough for you as a person. But what I have realized in the process of the show is that there are times when it feels absolutely not necessary, but absolutely legitimate to want to end your journey, because it feels difficult to continue, it feels burdensome, it feels difficult to balance the show with school and other duties that you have as an individual. Angifika ngekugcineni komncintiswano, kodwa I think what I feel more than anything is a sense of gratitude, the very sense of gratitude I began with, to have been part of such an important process, to learn so much about the process, but to leave without regrets. What I made sure of was that every solution I provided would be something I would defend till the very end. And to leave with the hope that if at least one person heard me and would someday enact whatever I proposed, is sufficient for me to feel like I've made an impact on the show. I'd like to thank Uma no Baba. At Nsweni, you guys didn't have to take so much of your resources to help me out. It isn't imperative that you go that far with your support, but you decided to do so regardless. Ngaloko ngiyabonga kakhulu. More than anything, ngibonile ukuthi nginaumphakathi ongisekayo. More than anything, ngibonile ukuthi engikwenzayo kubalekile kwabanye abantu nje ukudlula mina ukuthi ngenzani ngumuntu ngingedwa. Ngalokho ngiyabonga kakhulu. The journey has been stressful, the journey has been exciting, the journey has been challenging, but it's always great to be able to remember ukuthi angizenzeli ngingedwa, kukhona futhi abanye abantu abakubona kubalekile lokho engikwenzayo.
Linda Guhle, what a journey. Thank you so much for being a part of all of our lives. We've loved having you here. We've loved seeing you smile. We've loved seeing you thrive. And may you continue to do so in your life post the show. You are amazing. Sikuthanda kakhulu. That's it for tonight. Thank you so much to all of you at home for watching our program tonight. We are certainly back, and we're getting closer and closer to that One Day Leader finale. Who will walk away with the grand prize? Next week, we'll be discussing yet another thought-provoking topic. For now, I'll leave you with this quote from the father of our nation, the late Utatu Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. Real leaders must be ready to sacrifice all for the freedom of their people. Angibambe lapho kwanamhlanje siphinde futhi sihlanganeni ngesonto elizayo. From myself, uPearl Shong, uMtimanzi Bambolo, Imageza Ngelbise Mantahleti, and the rest of the One Day Leader team, it's good night.